Daf Yomi, Tractate, Zevachim, page 74b, top of the page, with the words Maishna Shlosha D'Ikaruba. Maishna Shlosha D'Ikaruba, Shnaim Nami Ikaruba. Maishna D'Gitani Tartihu. The Gemara asks, what is different about a case where the pomegranate fell into a group of three other pomegranates? The essential factor is that there is a majority of permitted pomegranates, which nullify the pomegranate that fell from the 10,000. Even if it fell into a group of two others, there is a majority of permitted items. Why must it fall into a group of three? The Gemara explains what is the meaning of three that the Tana of this Brisa teaches. It means that there were two permitted pomegranates initially, and the pomegranate of uncertain status fell into them for a total of three. The Gemara returns to the question concerning the opinion of which Tana is followed by Shmuel, who is stringent with regard to a compound uncertainty involving idol worship. And if you wish, say instead that Shmuel holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, as he is similarly stringent with regard to mixtures of items of idol worship, as explained in Tractate Avodah Zarah 49b. Amar Reish Lakish, Chavish Atum Shezaveh Me'Bchavios, Benafel Achaz Mehen Yam HaMelach Chutu Kulan Diamrinan Hachta Nafal Disuna Nafal. The Gemara discusses a related topic. Reish Lakish says, in the case of a barrel of truma produce, which may be eaten only by a priest and his household, that was intermingled with 100 barrels of non-sacred produce, they are all considered as truma, and as a sealed barrel is significant and not nullified. And if one of these barrels fell into the Dead Sea, all of the barrels are permitted, as we say. Since there is that barrel that fell, the assumption is that it is the prohibited barrel that fell. V'yitzrich the Rabbi Nachman, v'yitzrich the Reish Lakish, de'i mi Rabbi Nachman, hav yamina hanimila v'dizava de'ein la matirin, v'truma yesh la matirin la. The Gemara comments, and it was necessary for the Gemara to record the ruling of Nachman with regard to rings used in idol worship, and it was also necessary for the Gemara to record the ruling of Reish Lakish with regard to the barrels of Truma, despite the similarity between the two cases. The Gemara elaborates, as if the halacha were taught only from the ruling of Rav Nachman, I would say that this matter applies only with regard to a mixture involving an item of idol worship which has no permitting factors. Such items themselves cannot be permitted in any other manner. Therefore, the halacha is to be lenient, meaning to assume that the prohibited ring fell into the sea. But in the case of truma, which has permitting factors, as the mixture can be sold in its entirety to priests, perhaps the mixture should not be permitted because one of them fell into the sea. ואם מדרש לקיש הווה מינה חביס דמינה אחרא נפילתה אבל טבעת ללא מינה אחרא ונפילתה לא צריכי. And conversely, if the halacha was taught only from the ruling of Reish Lakish, I would say that the halacha is lenient only in the case of a barrel of truma, as its falling is noticeable and everyone will know that the other barrels were permitted due to the one that fell. Accordingly, they will not come to permit barrels in a similar case where no barrel became separated from the mixture, but with regard to a ring whose falling is not noticeable, perhaps the rest of the rings should not be permitted. Therefore, both statements are necessary. Amar Rabba lo hiti Reish Lakish el chavis דמינה אחרא נפילתה אבל תאנה לא. רב יוסף אמר אפילו תאנה כנפילתה כך עלייתה. Rava says Reish Lakish deemed the rest of the items permitted only in the case of a barrel, as its falling is noticeable. Excuse me. But in that case of a fig, in the case of a fig that fell from a group of figs that contained a fig of Truma, Reish Lakish does not deem the rest of the figs permitted, as the one that fell is too small for its fall to be indiscernible. And Rav Yosef says, Reish Lakish deemed the rest of the items permitted even with regard to a fig. The reason is that just as the initial falling of one fig rendered the entire mixture prohibited, so too the emerging of one fig from the pile permits the rest. Amar Rabbi Elazar chavishot truma shenaflu b'me'ach chaviyos v'seach echad b'hem kedei dimiyua v'shoit. Rabbi Elazar says, with regard to a barrel of truma wine that fell among 100 barrels of non-sacred wine, it cannot be nullified in its current state, as shield barrels are significant and are therefore not nullified. How should one proceed? He should open one of them so that it is no longer an item of significance, and take from it as much as ought to be taken from a normal mixture of truma and non-sacred produce, meaning 1/100th. He should give that to a priest, and then he may drink the rest of the wine. Yasiv Rav Dimi Amar le Hashmaisa Amar le Rav Nachman Gamar Ushiti Kachazina Hacha Ela Ema Niftecha Hacha Mehem Notalemana Ke Kede Dimor Vishote. Rav Dimi sat and said this halacha, and Rav Nachman said to him, I see a ruling of swallow and drink here, meaning this formulation indicates that one may act in this manner ab initio, means off the bat, right away, which is puzzling. Rather say, if one of the barrels was opened after the fact, one may only take from it as much as ought to be taken from a normal mixture of truma and non-sacred produce. He should give that to a priest, and then he may drink the rest of the wine. Amar Yehoshua, Amar Yehoshua, nai. Amar Yehoshua, Chavishot truma shesar b'chavishot chaviyos, v'yitzchov me'amihen, nozahem al k'dei dimur v'shoyse, u'she'ar asurin ad she'yipaschu, l'amrin al-yisur ha'beru d'iseh. With regard to the same issue, Rabbi Yehoshua says, in the case of a barrel of truma wine that was intermingled with 150 barrels of non-sacred wine, and 100 of them opened, one may take from it as much as ought to be taken from a normal mixture of truma and non-sacred produce. He should give it that to the priest, and then he may drink the rest of the wine. And as for the rest of the 50 barrels, they remain prohibited, meaning they have truma status until they are opened and the ratio of truma is separate from them. This is because we do not say that the prohibited barrel is in the group that contains the majority of barrels, and the one he opens is likely permitted. Ila yadale v'na yade de'it arav. Harove, excuse me. I think I said this line already. I'll say it again, just to get started. It's a little break before. Harove ve'anir ba kule bishlam kule lo yada ela hai trefa hechidami idya lele sim lishkale ilo yada le mana yada yitarav. The Mishnah listed various categories of prohibited animals. An animal that copulated with a person, or an animal that was the object of bestiality, an animal that was set aside for idol worship, or one that was worshipped as a deity, an animal that was given as payment to a prostitute, or as the price of a dog, or an animal born of a mixture of diverse kinds, or an animal that is treifa. The Gemara asks, granted, with regard to all of the other examples in this list, the prohibited animal is not known. In other words, it is physically indistinguishable from the other animals. But with regard to this treifa animal, what are the circumstances? If, due to its physical impairment, it is known to him which animal it is, let him come and take it from there, and all the other animals will be permitted. If it is not known to him, how does he know that a treifa animal was intermingled with others in the first place? Amri devei Rabbi Yanai hachab mayaskinan kigon diitarav nikuvat hakots bederusat hazeev. They say in the school of Rabbi Yanai, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case where an animal that was pierced by a thorn, which does not render it a treifa, was intermingled with an animal that was clawed by a wolf, which does render it a treifa. Since the skin of both animals has been pierced, one cannot identify the treifa. Reish Lakish Amar kigon ditarav b'nefula nefula livdeke kasar amda tzricha me'et le'et halacha tzricha b'dikam. Reish Lakish says there's a different answer. The Mishnah is discussing a case where a healthy animal was intermingled with a fallen animal, meaning one that has fallen from a great height. A fallen animal is prohibited in case it is a treifa, despite the fact that it bears no external sign of injury. The Gemara raises a difficulty with regard to a fallen animal as well. Let us examine it and see if it can walk by itself, in which case it is not a treifa. The Gemara answers, according to the opinion of Reish Lakish, even after an examination of this kind, it is still a possible treifa, which is prohibited to be sacrificed on the altar, as he holds that if an animal fell and stood up again, it requires a 24-hour waiting period. It requires a 24-hour waiting period to determine if it is in fact injured. Furthermore, even if it both stood up and walked after the fall, it requires inspection after slaughter to determine whether it was injured by the fall and rendered a treifa. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Kigon itara b'vlad treifa. Rabbi Eliezer hi damar vlad treifa lo yikrav legabe mizbeach. Rabbi Yirmiyah says there is a third answer. The Mishnah is referring to a case where a healthy animal was intermingled with the offspring of a treifa, which of course bears no sign of a treifa, and this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who says the offspring of a treifa may not be sacrificed on the altar. Kulhur Rabbi Yanai la Amri bet bein nukwat akos drusat hazev midiya hai mashich hai agil. The Gemara explains why each of these sages suggests a different interpretation of the Mishnah. All of them, meaning Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yirmiyah, do not say that the explanation of the Mishnah is in accordance to the explanation of Rabbi Yanai, that an animal pierced by a thorn that became mixed up with one clawed by a wolf, as they maintain that the difference between an animal pierced by a thorn and one that was clawed by a wolf is known, as this is perforation caused by a wolf is elongated, and the perforation caused by a thorn is round. Reish Lakish lo amri. Reish Lakish lo amri kasavri amda eno tzaricha mes le'es halacha eno tzaricha v'dika. The Gemara continues, Rabbi Yana and Rabbi Yirmiyah do not say that the explanation of the Mishnah is in accordance with the explanation of Reish Lakish, that the Mishnah is discussing a case where a healthy animal became intermingled with one that has fallen, as they hold that if a fallen animal stood, it does not require a 24-hour waiting period, and if it walked, it does not require any further inspection after slaughter at all. Consequently, one can simply examine the animals to see if they can walk, and if they can, they are fit. Finally, Rabbi Yana and Rish Lakish do not say that the explanation of the Mishnah is according to the explanation of Rabbi Yirmiyah, that the Mishnah is discussing a case where a healthy animal became intermingled with the offspring of a treifa, as they do not want to interpret the Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, because the halacha does not follow his ruling. Kachim min remino kule. The Mishnah teaches in a case where sacrificial animals were intermingled with other sacrificial animals, if it was an animal of one type of offering with animals of the same type of offering, one should sacrifice this animal for the sake of whoever it is its owner, and one should sacrifice that animal for the sake of whoever is its owner, and both owners fulfill their obligations. The Gemara raises a difficulty, but each animal requires placing hands on its head, a rite that must be performed by its owner, and in this case, the owner is unknown. Rav Yosef, the carbon nashim, anashim lo. Rav Yosef says the halacha of the Mishnah is stated with regard to the offering of women who do not perform the placing of hands. The Gemara is puzzled by this suggestion, but this indicates that with regard to an offering of men, the halacha stated in the Mishnah is not applicable, and therefore there is no way of rectifying a mixture of consecrated animals of the same type of offering.